Hi, and welcome to this evening's live Facebook discussion. We have had a lot of feedback from training centres that they are struggling for instructors recently, and we thought the best place to start was with assistant instructor training. So I've invited Liz and Johnny here tonight so we can discuss what's involved in training up your instructors. So yeah, well, welcome again tonight. Sorry for that. This is one of our first live sessions, and I've realised we've just gone live. So I'm going to repeat myself there, which is we're here this evening for one of our first sessions on instructor training. We've had a lot of feedback from clubs and centres that they're struggling for instructors at the moment. So we thought the first place to start was discussing assistant instructors and how we can get them trained up at your clubs and centres. So I've invited Liz and Johnny here tonight to discuss this topic with us. So before we get into it, I just thought I'd let them introduce themselves. So over to you first, Liz.
Hi there, my name's Liz McMaster and I'm the Chief Instructor for the Dinghy, Windsurfing and Wind Schemes, and I've been in post about 7 months now. Over to you, Johnny.
Yeah, I'm Johnny Cormack. I'm a principal up in the Lake District of Blackwell Sailing. We're a sailability site as well as our YA training centre, and I've been here just over a year, but we rely heavily on volunteers and assistant instructors.
Perfect. Thanks, you two, and thanks for joining me this evening. So the first question I've got is one more aimed at for you, Liz, which is who can be an assistant instructor and why might they want to do that?
So the joy of assistant instructors is that actually it's any age can be one, and people do it for loads of different reasons. So you might have young people in your centre or your club who maybe aren't into the racing side and want to sort of pursue instructing, and actually it's a really good hook to kind of keep them in the sport. They might actually want to use it for something like their Duke of Edinburgh, a volunteer sort of role. So there's kind of the younger side. You've also got those parents who maybe want to help out when the kids are out on the water within a club setting and kind of go, well, actually, I used to do it many years ago and I'd kind of like to get back into it. Or you might even have like other groups, sort of retired people who now have more time and actually for the social side want to get involved. And it's a different way of sort of getting out on the water. And I think that's really one of the reasons, and everyone has different reasons for doing it. So if you look at the sailability, a lot of people just want to give back into the sport and give other people opportunities. And actually the best part about being an assistant instructor is you need very few bits of paper to go with it. All you need is a recommendation from the principal of the centre you want to help at. And then also, if you're sailing, you need to hold one of the advanced modules. So that might be something like start racing or seamanship before you go. And that can be done by a direct assessment if people are already at the skill level. And if you're looking at it for windsurfing, it's a intermediate non-planing certificate or higher. So actually, there's no need for anything else. You don't need powerboat, you don't need first aid. So quite nice and easy, really.
Perfect. Thanks, Liz. And I say, Johnny, your centre uses a lot of assistant instructors. So I was just interested in knowing why you use assistant instructors and how you use them in your centre, really.
Yeah, I think what Liz just mentioned then, a lot of our volunteers, I mean, we have over 30 volunteers at this site, and they are mainly sort of semi-retired or retired who have been through sailing through their lives, and then they just wanted to give something back, and they're probably at the standard of the seamanship skills level or whatever, but they might not have come through the IYA. So the first thing is we try and make sure they're at that right level to then go on and do the AI course. So why we use them, I think, is it's a cost thing as well. So we can, because it's site specific and your principal can run the course, it means you can run it in-house and give people the training and confidence to operate within your centre. And you don't have to send people off to do training courses elsewhere that take 4 or 5 days and might cost you quite a bit of money, which is great because we're a charity and we don't have loads of money to do that for people. So so when they've done it in-house, they're confident with the setup which we have here. We go through all this safety operating procedures, and also people learn how to teach on our boats. We're quite a unique site that use unique boats called WAMLs. People might not have heard of those. Think of a Drascan without a drop keel. And And yeah, it's so that we can train people up to teach on those specific boats, which I think is a really good way to train people on our site. How we use them at our site, we generally have we have a senior instructor out on the water, usually operating from the rib, and then we use our assistant instructors in the boats with our clients. We're a sailability site, so mainly it's people with disabilities or learning difficulties, and they'll be skippering one of the boats for us with 2 or 3 clients in there with them. And it works really well because the lead instructor, the senior instructor, can feed back on the water and then after the session as well.
Perfect. And I guess with the use of the AIs, it really helps with your ratios as well, because they can count towards the ratios, can't they, for teaching?
Yeah, they can. Yeah, so we can have as soon as you put an AI in the boat, they can have 3 to 4 because I think we're classed as keel boats with the WAMOs. So and sometimes we might have a volunteer that's maybe not quite an AI but wanting to give a bit of time back. They can sail in there as well.
Yeah, and we get a lot of questions about the appropriate use of assistant instructors. Can they, when particularly with the ratios, and can they drive a powerboat? Can't they drive a powerboat and stuff like that? So, Liz, probably a question for yourself is, what is the appropriate use of assistant instructors within all training centres?
So I think you need to look at it in each individual setting, and that's where it's sort of why it's so centre specific. So like Johnny's just described, if you've got a centre that's operating with lots of in-boat tuition, having an assistant instructor who's in the boat with under direct supervision of either a senior instructor or an instructor works really, really well. You could also use them. So if we put it into a windsurf context, you might well actually use them while your students are first starting out as someone who's either at the start or at the end of a reach as people are turning around and give some feedback. It might be if they hold a powerboat level 2, you might be able to use them in a powerboat, being again one end of a course or something if you're sort of doubled up in single handers. It really depends how you look at it, but essentially they act as a qualified members of staff, and that's really important because that helps you towards your ratios. It is always said, like, you need to think about your individual setting. So some settings, like let's take a lake, that might be really nice and easy to do and think they can actually act in full ratio. If you're working somewhere that's a little bit more challenging, you might need to think about paring that back. And that's again where the chief instructor and the principal can make those decisions. And I think as long as you're being sensible with it and training them appropriately, you've actually got a lot of use for an AI.
Perfect, thanks, Liz. And I know the AI training, again, we get quite a lot of questions around what should be involved in everything. And I know it's a 20-hour course, but what exactly do we need to fit into that 20 hours?
So I think it's 20 hours, and it's the way you break the course down will again depends on how you're set up, whether you want to run it at the very start of a season as a block of time where you give it a weekend and you spend that time as a group sort of going through the course. It might be that actually it's more appropriate that you do it over the course of a season. Before you're using them in ratios, it might be 2-hour blocks. So we have a group who are doing their Duke of Edinburgh, and the assistant instructors acting as part of their skill. And what they're doing is they're doing 2 hours at the start of each session, and then they're going out and helping as unqualified assistants on those sessions. So they're not actually in ratio, but they're working towards it and using it as both their skill and their volunteer. Another way I've seen it done is in modules. And I think when you look at it, the reason the RA haven't produced a full kind of this is what needs to be included is, as Johnny said, like if you look at the situation they've got in WAMLs, what you're going to be delivering on an AI course there is different to, say, a centre that's going to use an assistant instructor with a set of oppies somewhere like Saltons where they're in waders and helping push and shove oppies around. So all you've got to think about when you're planning your course is what is it they need to know? What is it I'm going to be using my AIs for? And then you're going to train them around that. So for instance, for Johnny's, where they're in boat, you're going to spend a lot of your time looking at the double-handed method, because that's the bit we need them to be able to do. So actually, not just what the teaching points are, but where do they position themselves in the boat? How do they set the session up for success? What should it look like at the end? Those are the kind of bits that are going to go in. And yet that's going to take up the large majority of your time. You'll then have other little sections that you'll drop in dependent on the groups that you're going to work with. So if it's young people, or groups that are at risk, you'll probably want to put some areas around safeguarding and welfare in. You're also going to want to look at what to do in an emergency and all the kind of normal standard operating parts that you would put in. And it's where you can't have this is one way of doing it. It would be awesome if we have more time to put things and talk about like the onboard or sailability, but the reality is the majority of the time should be spent actually out on the water doing, because that's where they're going to have the most effect on people. And also how to rig the boats that they're using is probably pretty key.
Yeah, perfect. And be interesting to hear from you, Johnny, on how you do your AI training at Blackwell.
Yeah, it does vary a little bit, but what Liz just said there is, well, generally we start off with a day out of season for those people that have identified that they want to do the AI course and that we feel are up to the sort of sailing standard. We'll bring them in and we'll do a little bit of the theory to start with, maybe when the boat's not even on the water, and we'll run through the teaching methods, the safety operating procedures, emergency action plans, all that sort of stuff we can cover in the classroom. And then once the boats are on the water, then we go two ways. We can either run a course with a group of aspiring AIs and run it like a mini instructor course where you take over your different sessions and people will lead different sailing techniques or skills they want to learn, or we do some on the job in the boats with them while we've got some clients on the water with us, working alongside a senior instructor that will give people confidence when they're on the water. They can sort of feed in from what the senior instructor has to offer and maybe take over and start leading sessions there as well. So yeah, there's a couple of different ways you can go about it. And it depends on the time of year and when we're actually running these courses, what we can fit in.
Perfect. And have you seen it run any differently at different centres, Liz, or is that a good format?
Yeah, I think that works really well. I think, as I said, the one that I used previously was with a sort of multi-activity youth group who I used to have on a Saturday morning. And as the kids kind of came through, to keep them engaged, keep them wanting to continue to stay in the sport, we used to then have an AI program for them so that they'd still go to the same session, but the hour before we'd spend sort of talking about how they can assist and sort of then put that into action during the session. So it was on the job training. We were just using them as unqualified helpers at that point until they'd been through the whole training. And that worked really well because it really helped them stay and kind of see an exit route for them rather than just dropping out of the sport because they weren't sort of having the same enjoyment that they were. It's a different way of looking at it for them. And actually quite a lot then went on to become instructors in the future for us. And I've even seen a few of them around since then as senior instructors, which is nice to see.
No, that's fantastic. And I think hopefully those two examples emphasize why it is centre specific, because it's a 20-hour course and you need to cover a lot of things from the operating procedures through to the teaching the method and how you actually safely deliver activity at that site. And within 20 hours, that's all we've got time for to safely train someone to act as an assistant instructor at that specific site. So, for example, operating with Johnny and the sailability group at Blackwell is going to look very differently to running school and taster sessions at Plasmeni off the beach there. So I think for anyone asking why, it's because it's a 20-hour course and we've got a lot to fit in, and it's very much centre specific and how that centre needs to use those assistants to benefit and support that centre's activities. Would you add anything else onto that, Liz?
Yeah, I would. And I think that's really important. If you get someone who has had their assistant instructor previously in another centre, as the centre principal and the person who's going to be running the training, you can have a look at that and discuss with them about what their prior learning is to work out where the holes and gaps are, so that actually you can redo the course and look at just those things. And it might actually be that part of that prior learning can be used in your ongoing training. And actually that not everybody wants to progress on to becoming an instructor. So the idea is with the AI is when it was first kind of thought about was actually it's the first step on a pathway to becoming an instructor. Some people actually might never move on from being an assistant instructor, especially some parents or those who are retired. That's what they want to do. They don't have any desire to go on, like Johnny said, and do a 5-day course. But actually, for some of our younger people, that might just be the first step. So I think it's where you need to look at deciding what you're trying to achieve with your AI and being really clear with that from the start.
Yeah, perfect. And once they've done the AI training, what's the process for them being signed off and officially? I know with instructor courses, the dinghy trainer fills in the record card and a nice certificate comes through the post. What's the process with the AI training?
So you'll find at the back of the G4, no longer in the G14, in the back of the G4 now is an assistant instructor, so it can be signed off in there. And then as a centre, you can buy a pad of certificates in exactly the same way you can for your level 1s and level 2s, which are the assistant instructor certificates. And you can get those both for dinghy sailing and for windsurfing at the moment. Watch your space for wing, because we're not quite there yet for the wing scheme. It will come. And actually you fill that in and they've got something to take away and something to be super proud of, because actually it's still something they've really had to work hard for and they've put a lot of effort in. So it's nice to be able to award them. And it's even better if you can do it on an evening when people can kind of have a bit of recognition for the often volunteer role that they're putting back into.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for that, Liz. And I think it's a key thing to remind everyone that once they are trained and signed off as an assistant instructor, like all instructors, every centre should be providing ongoing support and training for their volunteers and instructors, and making sure they record that as well so they can keep track of what they've done and what they need to do. So I just say, think about that as well, is once they've finished that training, what support do you offer them on a regular basis to keep upskilled and delivering safe training at your site. I'd always, as the regional development officer, always recommend our regional instructor training days are a great place to send your instructors. You should always be sending them copies of their operating procedures on an annual basis and making them aware of any changes as soon as they happen. And again, thinking about your site and what training's needed at your venue and getting them involved in those days at your site. I think just on that ongoing training, do you offer anything at Blackwell, Johnny, on a regular basis?
Yeah, we do an annual induction, which is basically a mini AI course, really, covering all the aspects we just discussed earlier. And that all gets recorded and ticked off to make sure everyone's still at the same standard and sort of singing off the same hymn sheet, really. So, yeah, we do it. We run 2 or 3 sort of pre-season training days. That's once the boats are on the water, we get out there and we do. But yeah, then that's all recorded. And then through the season, we do offer training sessions where people can just come along when we've got a day where we might not have a group in, they can just get out on the water and work on skills. And just recording that is really key, and it works well here.
Yeah, perfect. And I know a couple of centres I've been working with in the Northwest, one of their hot topics at the minute is safety boat driving, and just they've run some safety boat refresher days for their clubs and volunteers, and they've recorded them and logged them, and they've been really useful for their instructors. Is there anything you'd like to recommend or add for that ongoing training, Liz?
No, I think it's just like you said, like when you look at the recognised guidance notes, you're taking your assistant instructor and you're making them part of your instructional team. So everything you'd normally do for your instructors in terms of inductions and the ongoing monitoring and watching of sessions and giving feedback is just the same. And it's super important to give the feedback to the assistant instructors because they want to do better and they want to feel part of the team. And I think that's really important.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. And then just moving on slightly, because we're almost at the end of our time, was a lot of our assistant instructors are quite often volunteers. And probably a question for Johnny, how do you sort of recognise and thank and keep your assistant instructors motivated throughout the season?
Well, I wrote in my notes here, the best thing we do here is provide quality biscuits and a good cup of tea at the end of each session. So I think it is a really key thing, just a little thank you and maybe a gathering at the end of each session, just to say thank you. And it keeps them motivated. And as long as there's plenty of tea and coffee available, it's all good. And an end of season do as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Johnny. And just then to finish up on a question that we've had come in is, and I don't expect you to know the answer to the first one of these questions, Liz, which is how many AIs have gone on to become DIs. I don't suspect you have that stat written down, but
no, afraid not.
Do you see a lot of them transferring across, and would you have any recommendations for them moving along that pathway?
I think it's dependent on the age group. So I know a lot of people who are really happy as who are retired and working with some of the older age groups who are absolutely happy to be assistant instructors. They don't have any desire to become instructors. Quite often, the ones we see moving through might be parents who are like, well, actually, got a couple of kids coming through. I might fancy being an instructor. Or it's the younger people who are kind of like, actually, I'm really enjoying this. And actually, I see this as being something I can do in my holidays. And that kind of idea about doing seasons is quite appealing. And I think really and this is the bit where Johnny's been saying, how do you thank people for centres who are operating with people who have a desire to move in the course? Actually, rather than just your tea and biscuits, which is a great thing, some places do well, actually, you've been helping us out, so we're going to put you on a powerboat course or give you reductions, which starts to help the ball rolling. And I think the other thing that's in our arsenal at the moment is the single-hander instructor. This is actually a really good start where people don't need to put quite so much time into it, because we're aware giving up 5 days of holiday if you're a parent can be quite tricky. So actually, how can we make that more sustainable and more easy to get people into that kind of instructor? And that's to go into the single-hander, which is a 3-day course rather than a 5-day. Has the same prerequisites, but that's what we can work on as an assistant instructor, getting them out sailing in their free time, free use of boats if they've been helping out. All of those bits moves people through into that instructor pathway. And as I say, I know people who I had as assistant instructors many moons ago who are now senior instructors and still working in the industry and loving it. So yeah, you do get those. Some won't continue, but hopefully the idea is tries to make me feel a little bit old towards the end. But yeah, keep saying thank you by giving them qualifications is one of the big ones.
Yeah, thank you. And a big question. I know Johnny's about to have his group return and his SIs return back in soon. So one of the last questions I've got is a one that comes quite regular, which is there a minimum age for AI training?
No minimum age, and the reason for that is it's centre specific, and it will depend upon what you're planning to use them on. And it's where, as a chief instructor and a principal, you need to use discretion. So actually having a kid who is 14 or 15 and super good at talking to people and actually has come up through the OPIs, what better role model for your 8 and 9-year-olds first learning to OPI sail than someone that they can really aspire to. Now, you wouldn't use that same 14-year-old in a Wayfarer or a WAML with a group of adults who are first learning to sail. So it's where you need to think about each of your settings. And actually what might be really cool for one group might not work for another. So that's why there's no minimum age.
Yeah, and I think it comes into your local knowledge as well, which is, do you know, is that person ready to be an assistant instructor? And that can happen at any age, really. Some can be younger and ready, and some need that little bit more time, I guess.
Yeah, that's it. And again, that's why it's at the discretion and it's centre specific, so that you can use them in different ways.
So the final question then, before we finish this evening, has come from Dan Jaspers, and you'll see it on the screen there, Liz. So I'll let you have a read of that one, and we'll get your thoughts across.
So we are looking at putting some guidance together specifically for sailability. Joff, who heads up the sailability program, is looking to put together sort of what it might look like for sailability groups, because it is slightly different. And again, the way we want to make it is actually each sailability group will be just as different as each centre. So what works up for Johnny might not work for the pool sailability guys and their hawks. So actually what we need to do is make sure we're looking at it on a centre by centre basis. But there is and you can probably help me out with this, Adam, the name of the course that you can get the guys, the disability
awareness training course is probably the best place to sign people to, and I'd encourage you to get onto that course. It's been revamped recently, and it was a really good course, the disability awareness training. And what I'd also suggest is get in touch. Like Johnny Cormack here runs a fantastic centre. He also volunteers a lot for Blind Sailing UK, and we've got a wealth of knowledge at different centres as well. So I think what we're going to do is come to a close there. I'd say if you want more information, please do reach out either to your local regional development officer, or email training@awaa.org.uk, and they can either give you the guidance or point you in the right direction of the best person to speak to get that information. We also have a wealth of information on the training support site on the AWA website. So no, thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Liz, for your time tonight. And for everyone that's watched this content, I think it's a new way of us delivering this. So thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed it and you do want to see more things like this, please comment, like, share the content, and we'll try and produce some more stuff. In 2 weeks' time, we've got one on becoming a senior instructor. So we'll look forward to speaking to you and seeing you all then. Thank you.